Shalom, everybody. Today we will be reviewing the second part of the Hebrew alphabet. So last week was part one. We reviewed the first 10 letters. Today we are finishing up the Hebrew alphabet with letters Kaf to the letter Tav. And here's that bird's eye view of the rest of the letters we'll be writing today. Last week we did the first 10 letters from Aleph to Yod. And hopefully by now you're able to identify each of those letters by name and their respective pronunciations. And you'll notice how today will require more effort, not just because it's a few more letters, but we'll also be dealing with variations of certain letters, with certain letters having a few rules attached to them. So as a repeated recommendation, sincerely, personally, I'd say you should be writing every single letter at least 10 times until you fill up an entire line in your notebook. Basically, I have several notebooks that last week we kind of worked on that, but I only did it 3 times just to show you. But you should be writing it throughout like the whole lines, and obviously in a bigger notebook if you have one. Um, but yeah, because when you're doing this, you're practicing to remember the name of the letter, how to write the letter, and again, your opportunity to learn to familiarize yourself with writing and reading from right to left. So don't make that mistake of doing it from left to right. No, this is right to left. And again, this is a pre-recorded lesson, so take as much liberty as you want, pausing the video upon each letter. Don't feel rushed. Dedicate as much time necessary for your writing, okay? Everyone should go at their own pace because the goal of this lesson is once again to memorize and to learn to write the rest of the Hebrew alphabet. So as you see here, the letters Tet and Yod, this is where we left off last week. And today we're going to continue with the letter Kaf, which looks like this, sort of like the hand of a Lego. Let me do it twice. Now, don't make the mistake of treating this like a bet, because the bet, if you remember, the purpose of the bet was that it had a base that was disconnected from that curvature. But the kaf, on the other hand, is you could do it all in one stroke, all curved, like that. Now, let's discuss the first two right up top here. Let me use my highlighter to show you. We're going to talk about kaf and chaf. So what is the difference between chaf and chaf? You'll notice right here on the right, I'll put kaf, and then this one on the left is chaf. Now the difference, I'm sure you've already told, is the little dot in the middle, which is called a dagesh. And let me just write that up here. Dagesh, which literally just means dot. Okay, because when the dot is present, the letter is referred to by its first name, kaf, which is a voiceless velar plosive. It makes a k, k, k sound, as in the word kangaroo. Now, when the dot is not present, as you see here, the letter is referred to by its second name, which is chaf, a voiceless uvular fricative. And we've already seen the noise that this makes, the sound that this makes with the letter chet. Remember the letter chet? It was up here, the letter chet, and it's that sound that comes from the throat, the ch. So when the dot is present, it is kaf, and when it isn't present, it is chaf. Okay, and let's just go ahead and right here on top, I'll put the K to transliterate kaf, and then I'll put a slash to write CH or KH, or for Spanish speakers, you could use J to transliterate the chaf sound. Now, let's look at the bottom two letters on here that is called kaf sofit and chaf sofit. What's the deal with that? Look at the bottom two. Okay, you'll notice that it's the same letter as the top kaf, but instead of curving to the left, it goes all the way down, and it breaks the barrier of the line. Okay, so this is the first letter we're seeing that breaks down that line. Okay, every other letter except the yod that's suspended in midair, it touches the top, touches the bottom, but the kaf breaks down past the bottom. Okay, and this, we'll call it kaf sofit, and this is chaf sofit. Okay, these letters that are known as sofit means final forms. So I'm just going to write up here, final. Okay, what does this mean? It means that this form of the letter is only used when it is the final letter of a word. So if a word begins with the letter kaf, or if it just contains the letter kaf in the middle, kaf or chaf for that matter, it is written in its regular form, these standard basic forms. But if a word ends with the letter kaf or chaf, we use the sofit, meaning the final form of the letter. Okay, and we've reviewed the presence of the dagesh, and the same applies to the final form. This is kaf sofit, so it's pronounced as k, 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 and this is chaf sofit, pronounced as ch, ch. Okay, again, you can use the English letter K to transliterate the kaf or the kaf sofit, and the English letters CH or KH, and for Spanish speakers J, to transliterate the letter chaf or chaf sofit. All right, next is the letter lamed, and I'll write it, let's see, right here. Notice how the letter lamed actually breaks the line on top here. Maybe not so emphasized there. Let me write it once more. Again, so if this line is the top, this line is the bottom, the letter lamed is actually breaking the top barrier, and that makes it the tallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet, okay? Sorry, I'm a little, gotta make sure it's line, and then that leg does curve down to the middle. There it is. Okay, so the letter lamed makes a l sound, as in look, and you can use the English letter L to transliterate the letter lamed. All right, next is the letter mem, which we write like this. Now I start with that little hair sticking up, then I go down and I go back up, do the curve. There it is. So that's the letter mem, which is voiced as a bilabial nasal, making an sound, as in the word market. Okay, but here too we see that the letter mem has a sofit, and that mem sofit is actually sort of a squared, boxed letter. Okay, now what does this mean again? It is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet that has a sofit, a final form to it. Only when the word ends with the letter mem can we use the mem sofit. But if it just contains an m at the start or in the middle, it is always going to be the basic form. The sofit letter is only used at the end of a word. Okay, and for the transliteration, you can use the English letter m to transliterate the letter mem, and the same goes for mem sofit. The next letter is the letter nun. Now the letter nun, I teach it as being a very, very thin bet. Very thin, very skinny. It needs to eat. A very, very skinny bet. Because you see, if you were to, some students make the mistake of writing the letter nun like that, and I tell them that's just a bet, or it looks like a kaf. You're not supposed to make it wide. It's very skinny letter. It's skinny for a reason, right? And this is the third letter of the Hebrew alphabet that has a sofit form. And the sofit form is just an elongated line. Now you could say, well, doesn't that look like the vav? Well, the vav stops at the bottom barrier. That's a vav. The nun continues all the way down past the bottom barrier. Okay, that's the difference between vav and nun. So let me just erase the vav there. We don't get confused. Okay, so what does the sofit mean? Sofit means it's the end, the final form, meaning that if a word starts or has a nun at the beginning or in the middle, you use the regular form. The sofit is only at the end of a word, okay? And the letter nun makes a n sound, as in the word nap. So you can use the English letter n to transliterate the letter nun. Alright, so I've turned the page, and the next letter is Samech, which is fairly easy because it's just a circle. And I usually make mine very circular like that, or like that. Very easy, the Samech. And the Samech is a sibilant that makes a s sound, as in the word super. So you can use the letter S to transliterate the letter Samech. Samech. All right, let's continue with the letter Ayin, which I've had a few people tell me looks like the English letter Y. But try not to get that confused. The Ayin. Also, make sure that you understand that the Ayin has an elongated right side, and the left side is attached to the right leg. Okay, because that's going to be very important in distinguishing it from another letter later on. Now, the Ayin is a glottal stop, and for our purposes, we'll just say that it's a silent letter, like the letter Aleph. Remember the letter Aleph, meaning that its function is to serve the vowel that follows it. So when you see the letter Ayin, it doesn't necessarily make a sound, but rather the vowel that is attached to it, which we'll learn in a future lesson, that's the reason the Ayin is there. Okay, so whenever you see an Ayin, I would recommend using an apostrophe. I'll put it right up here. An apostrophe, right? Because it'll help you distinguish the letter, as it can also serve as a pause, which breaks the words into different syllables. So those are the purpose. That's how we will review the aleph and the ayin as silent letters. Those are the two silent letters in the Hebrew alphabet, aleph and ayin. All right. Next, I'll be drawing or writing, sorry, the letter Pei, which, as you could see, I start off by writing what looks like a kaf, and then I add sort of a little nose to it, right? Or if you want to start from the middle, you go up, and you go like that. Okay, so the first will have a dagesh in it, the second will not. And what's the difference? Well, the dagesh makes it a letter Pei, that's its first name, which is a voiceless bilabial plosive that makes a p sound, as in the word power, right? So when the dagesh is present, it's referred to by its first name, Pei, pronounced as p. But when the dagesh is not present, it is referred to by its second name, Fei, pronounced as a labial dental fricative, as in you see it in the English word funny, funny. Okay, and here too we actually see a suffit, but you may ask, how come there's only one suffit? Shouldn't there be a suffit for each one? Well, uh, actually, we're only going to go over one suffit, which we draw it like that, which again looks like a kaf suffit, but with the little nose, it makes it into a fe suffit. So you could ask yourself, where is the pe suffit? And this is where a word of advice came from Professor Zev Garber at Los Angeles Valley College. When he saw me give one of my first classes at my community, and he actually recommended. He said, "There's no need to worry about the pace of it. It's practically non-existent in Hebrew. A word will never really end with the letter pei. It's if it does, it's automatically assumed to be a fei suffit. So that's why we're only going to worry about pei, fei, and fei suffit. Remember, suffit means the ending form. So anytime the letter pei appears at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word, it is pei or fei. But if it's always at the end, it's going to be a fei, suffit, always written like that. So you can use the English letter to transliterate pei, it's going to be p, and to transliterate the letter fei or fei suffit, it's going to be the English letter f. All right, next we have the letter Sadi. Sadi, and this is what I meant when I said that you have to remember the letter Ayin. I'm actually going to bring down the Ayin here. Because the letter Sadi has an elongated left leg, it curves down more like a 45-degree angle, and then its right arm stretches up. So that's the difference. Notice how the Ayin has its right leg going down, stretching out. The Sadi has its left leg going down, stretching out. So that's Sadi. And here is the final of the Sofit forms. This is the fifth and final of the Sofit forms, which instead of going to the side, it goes down. So that's a Sadi Sofit. We're going to write Sofit right here. Meaning, remember, The letter sofit can only be used at the end of a letter. Whenever the word ends with the Sadi, it ends with the sofit. But if it's at the beginning or in the middle of a word, it's just the basic Sadi. Now, the letter Sadi is another sibilant. Makes a sound like you're clicking your teeth, as in the imagine how the word cats ends. Cats, cats. And there are two ways to transliterate Sadi, depending on your preference. The first, I really got used to TZ, as I'm sure you've seen if you're familiar with the concept of tzitzit, the fringes on the edge of a talit, of a Jewish prayer shawl. But another way, which is preferred by Professor Garber, he says you should write TS. Okay, TS, and I've seen both prominent within the Hebrew learning community. So you use TZ or TS to transliterate the letter Tzadi or Tzadi Sofit. All right, and then we have the letter Kof, which is kind of a big letter as its leg breaks the barrier. Okay, so it's sort of like a almost done kaf, but broken up by its leg. So this is the letter Kof. The letter Kof is a voiceless velar plosive, making a k sound, as in the word king. And you'll notice how this is actually the same sound as the letter Kaf. Okay, so because of that, because it's the same letter, the same sound as the letter Kaf, some people choose to transliterate the letter Kof as a Q to distinguish it from the Kaf. But others, like myself, I just stick to the English letter K. I see no difference or really no problem using the same letter to transliterate because it's the same sound. That's really all it is. And remember, the transliterations, just to make a note, it's not of importance. The transliterations are literally just there to help us out. But the goal is that these are just our training wheels, the transliterations. One day we'll be able to just look at the letters and be able to, no need to transliterate. We'll be able to read it on its own. So these are just our starter training wheels, really. Right, and then we have the letter Resh, which is very interesting that you have to make sure you got it right. That curvature, okay? Don't make it like as a straight line because you'll confuse it with the letter Dalet. Remember the letter Dalet, which was the fourth letter? That one does have, I'll just draw this last one as the letter Dalet. It has that straightness and then that straight down, but the letter Resh is known for its curvature. Letter Resh has that curve. Okay, so what's interesting about the letter Resh is that it's a voiceless uvular fricative that makes a l sound. But first I'll say basically the letter R in English, so you could think of the word robot. But there are actually three different pronunciations of the Resh, and it really depends on where you're from or what you're already used to. Okay, so number one, I'll say that if you're of Western or English origin, the Resh simply translates into the way you pronounce your R coming at the front of your mouth, right? But then if you have Spanish background, you'll use the Resh the way you pronounce the R in Spanish, which is a sort of trill with your tongue at the front of your mouth, right? That's how the sort of a double R even. But the Israeli approach is actually, some people call it a French R, which means it's at the back of your throat. Okay, and I hope if there's any French speakers that I don't get critiqued too much, but it might sound awful coming from me, but think of the French word merci, merci, thank you. So the French R brings the pronunciation from the back of the throat to the front. In English pronunciation, it'd be merci, merci, merci to say thank you in French. In Spanish, it sounds merci, merci, hear that R. But in French, it's merci, mil. And another example is when a child is of age, maybe 13 years old in Judaism, he's considered a man. He undertakes a bar mitzvah. So the word bar mitzvah, meaning son of the commandment in Aramaic. In English pronunciation, it'd be bar mitzvah, bar. In Spanish, it sounds like bar mitzvah, bar mitzvah. But in Israeli, which is more of a French R, bar mitzvah, bar mitzvah. Okay, so no matter where, which you're comfortable with, it's really okay. You could use any of them. Remember, don't feel forced. I took a lot of time to try accustoming myself to the French R, but whenever I'm talking to or reading with, let's say, my Spanish community, I stick to the Spanish R, and whenever I'm talking to somebody that speaks English, I translate it with the English R. It's whatever you're comfortable with. So you can always use the English letter R to transliterate the letter Resh. Right, and then we have the letters Sheen and Sin. Now, I got used to writing my sheens like this, which is more blocky, but as you see in the example, you can also do it as a sort of curvy, but like I said, I do it more like this. And there's even some people that write it like this with only one leg, but all this is acceptable. They're all the same letter. Now, what's the difference between Sheen and Sin? Well, as you can see, the letter Sheen has the dot, which is not a dagesh actually. This one's considered just a nikudei shin, a dot of the letter shin. It's unique to the letter shin because depending on which side it's on, it has a different pronunciation. So when the dot at the top, the nikudei shin, is on the right side, it is shin, shin, okay, which is a sibilant making a sh sound, as in the word shady, shady. Or when you're trying to tell somebody to be quiet, you go shh. Okay. But when the dot at the top is on the left side, it is actually referred to as the word sin, pronounced as s, as in the word sad. Now, there's a clever phrase for English speakers that says, sin is never right, meaning sin, transgression of the law, is never right. It's never okay. So, what does that mean? Sin is never right. Anytime you see the dot on the right side, it'll automatically be shin because sin, the letter sin, is never going to be on the right side. Sin is never right. So you can use the English letters SH to transliterate the shin, the the sh sound, and then you can use the English letter S, as we saw in the Samech, to transliterate the letter sin. And finally, with the letter Tav, we start off with the type of Resh, but we extend it with the foot. That's what my community that's how my community refers to this little line. They say Tav is the one with the little foot. That's what distinguishes it from other letters. I'm just going to write it one more time. And that's the letter Tav. So finally, the letter Tav makes a dental sound pronounced as t, 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 as in the word toy. So you can use the English letter T, as we saw with the letter tet. You can use the English letter T to transliterate the letter Tav. So with this, we have reviewed each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And again, I highly recommend this not be a one-time thing because I cannot stress enough how important it is to repeat this, if possible, daily, nonstop. I remember doing this daily at school, especially when I was boarding classes. I'd just be writing it over and over again so that it can really, so I can ingrain these letters and their orders, their names, their pronunciations in my mind. And last month, actually, the kids at my church, who are also watching this, they were given the challenge of whoever writes the Hebrew alphabet the most times wins a prize. But the prize was a mystery. And we'd been studying for a while. I said we started back in December 2023, but we kind of let go of it. So to really get them back up, starting on their Hebrew, I felt that, by now we've repeated so much that we shouldn't be struggling with it. And by the time that Hanukkah came around, the results came in. After 2 weeks, the first place winner, which was 10-year-old brother Matthew, he wrote it over, I think it was 219 times. He wrote the entire Hebrew alphabet. So he won the mystery gift, which was $100, which was a surprise to everyone. And I'm sure if they had known that it was going to be $100, they would have written it a lot more times. So the intention was clear that even if the kids didn't understand why I wanted them to do such a challenge, the idea was to solidify the alphabet. Because now, weeks later, I can go up to them and I can ask them, hey, recite the alphabet as fast as they can, and they got it. Because it was a matter of practicing and repeating it. When they've done it over 100 times, they're going to be able to know each letter and how to transliterate each one as well, how to pronounce each one. So if you truly desire to be able to read Hebrew, you're going to put in the work, right? But if not, okay, there are tons and tons of translations out there made just for you. But if you're like me, that you want to get closer to the Hebrew text as much as possible, understanding the nuances and the differences in translations, then yeah, we're going to continue putting in the work as best as we can. So, shalom to all. I'll see you next week with the next lesson.